It is gloomy and snowy outside.
Welcome.
We are anticipating an ice storm or something like
Something
that.
big.
Something big, like our 5th storm this week or something. But welcome to Barbershop Talk. We are Barbershop Talk South Minnesota, as you know, or if you haven't tuned in, we are here for the at-risk community, the urban community, the African-American community. We hope to be a voice for the voiceless. Thank you for tuning in. Come and grow with us. We want to say a special thank you to the 300 folks that have liked us. That is amazing, and we thank you. It's all because of Bud here. But my name is Donovan Bailey. Bud Whitehorn co-host as well. Mr. Andre Crockett is stuck in Faribault somewhere due to the weather. So, Brother Crockett, thank you for tuning in. We have Dee Sabol here today, and I said it right.
Yeah,
Yes!
All right.
From the Diversity Council, we're going to get into it thick with Dee. But we want to remind you of a couple of things. We have our social media. We have our magazine. We're getting our website together. So that's coming. We have some future guests. In a couple of weeks, we have Angie Porter, attorney Angie Porter, here from the U of M. And then 1 week after that, we have the president from RCTC here to be with us. And he's been in town. Not long. So it'd be great to talk to him. And then we're planning some other things. So if you want to get involved, this is a community endeavor, and we want you involved. This is about that community that isn't often heard. And I need to say this, particularly as we get into some issues today. We are about addressing these issues within our communities from a positive standpoint, and also to promote the positive identity of our culture. Yes. We often don't see that. I want to make sure that we talk about that. So before we get into with Dee, brother.
Also, I wanted to add, if you haven't liked our page yet, I encourage everybody to like our page at Barbershop Talk Live, Southeast Minnesota.
Yes.
And if you have any comments for Dee, our guest, you can comment in the section, any of the live videos, and we have try to get your questions asked or comments spoken.
All right, so let's get into the elephant in the room. And also, I forgot to say, we should have a special guest coming today. We won't reveal that guest.
Yes.
So it sounds really, like anticipating and whatever. So hopefully he can make it out despite the weather. But we get into our elephants in the room usually on the top part of the show. As you know, in every barbershop, beauty shop in America, they are talking about elephants in the room and they expose them. So we try to do that here on our show. So let's get right into it today. And I want to let you all know that Barbershop Talk is a music enclave, right? Come to us for your music as well. Maybe. Yeah. Music. We love music here at Barbershop Talk. And I want to get into something that happened last Sunday. If you didn't tune into the All-Star game, basketball All-Star game, the national anthem was done by Anthony Hamilton, and his rendition was awesome. Yes, awesome. And I don't think it topples Miss Whitney Houston in the 90s, my opinion. But my question is, what is the best national anthem ever?
I'm going to have to go with Ray Charles in the 80s, man.
Oh, that's right. Ray Charles had a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good
I always love when young people do it because it just gives you chills.
Right.
But I don't think anybody can top Whitney's pipes.
Right. It was amazing.
Yeah.
She felt it. She was in the zone.
Yeah.
All of that.
You couldn't help but feel every word.
Right. I agree. I would give an honorable mention to Gary Clark Jr.
Oh,
See,
okay.
I think it was like 5 years ago. I think he did it on his guitar.
Yeah.
So, we can't. Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, yeah.
He did.
Yes.
Yeah.
He tore it up. So, hey.
He's in the top five.
That's some footage you gotta go
Right.
to find.
So,
yeah.
But we got to give it to Whitney. But check out Anthony Hamilton's version. If you know the style of his music, he did it in the style of his music, which was amazing. So a lot of stuff going on this week, and let's just get into it. Colin Kaepernick, and I want to be careful. No, we're in the bar.
Talk about it. You got to be careful.
He is an icon, and he's become an activist icon in our communities now. Thank you, Colin Kaepernick, for what you did.
Salute.
But it's interesting. This week, and I get this from Stephen A. Smith from ESPN. This week, he settled with the NFL on this major contract for them, dissing them, getting into the NFL.
I think it was 80 mil.
It was it 80 mil?
Yeah, I think it
Woo,
was.
brother got paid.
Don't quote me on it. I think it was somewhere close to 80.
So Stephen A just went off, and I think in a good way, and I'm not sure if he's right or not. But he said, okay, now that we know that this happened, how much did he get paid? And at that point, they didn't know how much he got paid. And then he wanted to know, and then other commentators comment, is he still an icon of the community in the sense of activism? Now that he's got paid all this money, and then two, if he comes back in the NFL, does he still kneel now that he's got the change?
So here's something I think about this. He had to bring the suit.
Right.
I mean, part of the equity and the justice of the situation was bringing that lawsuit.
Right, right.
And so I think we can't praise him for that and then say, oh, but we didn't know you were really going to get the money. And
Right.
Exactly.
I know it goes to our sense of motivation, but
True.
but he had to bring the suit. He had to do it.
Right, right.
Otherwise, this kind of treatment is going to continue.
Right.
Right, and it's an equity issue, and
Right.
it's an advancement issue.
True.
So I think that part is really important. I'd love to see him go back and kneel. First of all, I like him as a player, and
Right.
I think he's great. And I think that statement that was made by the kneeling, incredibly powerful.
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 Just like we haven't seen in a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
And I applaud him for going there, but the question is like, man, he just got paid.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s, the civil rights activists didn't get paid. But, and the question is, if he gets on the NFL team, does he still kneel? So that'll be interesting.
That'll be interesting. I don't think that he wouldn't kneel. I think he would.
I don't think he's getting back in the NFL because
I don't see him getting back in.
Because those owners are so slighted. They had to cough up that cash. He stirred the pot. That's my opinion. I don't know.
When you have people that say just based on his performance, he
Right.
wasn't performing at.
Right.
So if you just looked at what's he going to bring to a team,
Right.
there are people now he's been
Right.
a couple seasons out, and what's he going to bring to a team?
Yeah.
That's a totally different issue.
And NFL has some issues, and they have the rule about hiring coaches and some of the issues, but this is a big one. Hopefully, they get through this issue.
All right.
Well, you can't get through this week, y'all, without going to Jesse Smollett, and whether he's guilty or not. I know they're trying to figure it all out. Many questions and debates around it. I try not to get in these Facebook debates, but I did this week, and I shouldn't have. But I guess my question around this, given all that's going on, I'm like, and I don't want to diss the fact that racism still exists in a huge way, right? I work 9 to 5 for the public defender office, and I see this every day. But man, is it racially charged in our country? And I have a couple of questions if you all have some as well. One, are we too into celebrity culture?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is just celebrity gone wild.
Yeah.
Abuse of celebrity, and
Right.
and all of that.
Right.
We can't wait to catch these stories. But here's one thing, Donovan, that really troubled me. I saw a meme. I know it's a strange way to judge culture, but it had Jesse Smollett with the Obamas.
Right.
And it was somebody was like, "See, look, liars stick together," and
Oh, and
it's
that's stuff that comes out. Yes.
So that's the bad part. That's the part I think he never thought about is what does this do for the LGBTQ community?
Right.
What does this do for the
Ripple
Black
effect.
community?
Yeah.
Of
Right.
people saying, "Oh, it just proves our point."
Right.
So, but then you got the other side. What if he was telling the truth?
Yeah.
What if he is innocent? That's the other side of it.
Yeah. It's going
not
to
being
be
talked about, but
it's going to be touchy.
it's
Well, it's not like he's never faced
Right.
bigotry.
Right,
He
right.
has.
Right.
yeah, he's been caught before, but it's tough. It's tough. My Chicago people, we getting it hard right now. You know, in Chicago, we getting it hard in the media right now. All right, Kelly. Oh man.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Just
tough.
charges.
So okay, and again, I know people are going to slam me for this, and particularly if I put it out on social media. I know we still live with a lot of racism in this country, but does it seem like it's uptick now? and why are we getting all this? I mean, it's going back and forth, and we got dude packing guns to shoot all the Democrats, that guy, and it's just, what do we do about it? I mean, yeah.
So, here's one of the things that we talk about a lot at the Diversity Council, and it's called the pyramid of hate. And it's something that's used by psychologists and social psychologists and sociologists, because it's the same pathway for individuals and cultures, populations. And you start with bias, and then bias builds and changes, right? And it gets introduced into media, and then, you know, language changes, and from bias you go to discrimination, and or to prejudice, right? Where you're buying into it suddenly, and then you're the one saying, right? This, we knew, see, liars stick together. That's people buying into it and saying it. Then it moves to discrimination, and we had the issue in Lonsdale with a cafe that said, you know, get out Muslims, and that's discrimination. And that moves into violence, which, you know, can be vandalism, and, you know, all of those things. And that moves into the bigger things, arson and physical attacks and everything, all the way up to genocide. Tip of that pyramid is genocide.
That's right.
Never in human history has there been a genocide that didn't start with bias.
Wow.
But if you move up, discrimination on up, we have systems that address those things, right? Criminal and civil.
Right.
The only thing that addresses bias is us.
Right.
We have to step up. We have to challenge it every time we hear it. Every time we see it, we have to be active, and that means everybody.
Right.
Otherwise, you know, the political climate right now is the way it is because it's okay.
Right.
Because people are allowing us to make that progression.
And I hope, and I know I try not to diss our president, at least in a forum like this, but I wish, my brother used to say everything rises and falls on leadership. I'm hoping that he comes out and shows some type of unity, because the way I see it, particularly working in criminal justice, the scary thing is the folks that have mental health issues and they really internalize some of this craziness.
Or people with a lot of fear, a ton of anger.
Yeah.
They do, they internalize it, and then they're going to act on it.
Yeah. So, and I'm hoping I know he did something for Black History. It didn't get a lot of press, but I'm hoping that he'll take the charge and lead in this way, much like President Obama did, because it's getting out of hand. Of course, it's been absolutely worse, and we don't take time to really talk about the positivity of what's going on either. But
and there is a silver lining, and that is that more and more people are standing up. More and more people are talking, are using their voices. In fact, every time we have an incident, you know, we get some calls or people are concerned, we get 3 times as many calls of people saying, what can I do? Right. How do I get in the space? What do I do? How do I change? Always.
Well, let's get into it with Dee. Dee is here from the Diversity Council. Dee, tell us about you. I know a lot of people know you because of all you've done in the last 5 or 6 years or more.
I've only been here 3.
You only been here 3 years?
Seems like forever.
3 years in a
Yes. At the Diversity Council.
My husband says.
Tell us about you and what got you here. Then certainly we'll get into the Diversity Council.
Sure. So came 3 years ago for this job, you know, from Colorado.
You weren't moving here for the balmy weather?
No, not for the balmy weather. Though I did spend my childhood north of the city, so
really?
I can't say I didn't know. But yeah, came for the job, had wanted to kind of get back to the Midwest, had really been looking at Sioux Falls, because that's a city doing a lot of really good stuff.
Right.
Then kind of discovered Rochester and Destination Medical Center, and thought about, you know, here you have a community that's still small enough to be nimble, and wants to be intentional about growth, and what kind of opportunity is that to make sure every voice is part of that discussion. Everybody's benefiting. So packed up my husband and my son and his wife, and off we came. And 3 years have flown by, but I love it. So prior to this, I was in government, but still doing diversity and inclusion and community engagement and connectivity and all of those kinds of things. So.
Well, great. So tell us about the Diversity Council, particularly in its evolution, because I know it's evolved, and I picked up a graphic here. I don't know if you want to refer to it. But tell us how it evolved, because I was surprised to hear maybe, I don't know, we had a conversation maybe 6 months ago. I'm like, oh, you guys are doing that?
Yeah, we're doing a lot. So, you know, this is our 30th year.
Okay.
And we're proud of that, but at the same time, really, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
That's what we want to talk about.
yeah. So one of the things we did on my arrival was really take a look at what do we need to be doing? What space do we need to be in? Spent 18 months talking to community. Tell us what's important. And the three things that rose for us were all equity issues. And they are equity, educational equity, civil equity, and that's equal treatment under law, both through law enforcement and the judicial system, right? Public policy, all of those things, and health equity, which is larger than just equitable access to care. It's really how do people access everything they need so that they can address their own health and wellness, right? Affordable housing, food security, mobility, living wage, all of those things. So we do our work in those three areas now, and we have been extremely intentional, particularly in kind of that green community mobilization era of bringing people to the table, of making sure there is authentic and intentional outreach, and that people are moving into the spaces where decisions are made.
Oh, nice,
so
nice.
Super important thing to us.
Oh, absolutely. So, how do you, for the community we operate with, and certainly you work with them as well, how do they access the Diversity Council? What is the, I have an issue, because I think a lot of times, even us as the Barbershop Talk in our 6 or 7 months of existence, often we'll get calls for help.
Right.
So how would a person, what would they get from you? I know businesses interact with you and what have you, but.
So we do a lot of different things, but for individuals, we really concentrate on authentic referral. So people come to us and they need to work through what's my issue, what has happened, and we try to make the right space for them to talk all the way through, figure it out. Then we can either help them by connecting them to a live person.
Okay, cool.
That's critically important. We don't ever just give out a number or say, hey, check out this website. We really try to make a connection. To get people to the resources that they need. A lot of times, when people contact us, really what they need is to be heard and to talk through it, and then they can decide for themselves their next step.
Oh, that's good. So people can do that.
Absolutely. We have lots and lots of resources online, and then we have our staff and trained volunteers that support that as well.
That's what I want to ask. What's the training process with the volunteers? How do one come in and say, I want to volunteer to help with the diversity here and train?
So we have different things, different ways to volunteer. We have people who voluntarily do some trainings with us. We do a ton of anti-bias training. So the stuff that goes out into community, we have volunteers that help to deliver. And we have pretty rigorous training. We want people really to be able to do two things: to recognize in themselves what their biases and other things are, and to learn to listen to other people. Really listen. So we use the compassionate listening model. You're not paraphrasing and feeding back. You're just creating this space to hear what's going on. So we do trainings frequently for different things. We have other programs, our human library, and Allies and Advocates. Both of those have trainers that are people who come in and are trained and deliver. So
you're a great community resource. Would you say that you are being used? I know we don't want to give you more work. I'm sure you're working 120 hours a week. But would you say people are accessing the fullness of what the Diversity Council is about?
I think that's been our goal, right? We wanted to increase our visibility and the awareness of who we are and what we do. And so we've been out in community and we've gotten what we asked for. So yes, I would say we get requests every week. Come and participate in this. Come and support this. Help us with this. One of the things we do really, really well is promote and connect people with information. And I think that's critically important. So we're not always, we're out in community everywhere, but we're not necessarily the ones doing the really hard work. So, you have recovery is happening in that space, and you have, IMAA and the immigrant space, and you have all of these hundreds of organizations doing critical work. But we want to make sure that we're convening people. So we formed the Social Justice Coalition. There are 31 organizations in the Social Justice Coalition.
Wow.
Other thing,
I did not know that.
yeah.
Okay.
So how do we learn to work smarter together, be more effective? And we see that as an important role for us because we work really hard on connectivity.
So I got an odd question for you. I was trained as a cultural competency facilitator about a year ago with Dr. Deidre Hawkins out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I've since done a lot of trainings, and obviously given what I do and what we do, we deal with diversity and race all the time. This week has been heavy with race.
Absolutely.
So in relationship to compassion fatigue and secondary trauma, right? I was doing a training and I'm like, well, let me give you an example. This week, and we'll get into the schools, there was a person that spoke up in Owatonna about the race issues over there in the last couple of weeks. And the woman said something to the effect, why can't we just love each other? Something to that effect.
Sure.
Do you ever go home and think, man, this is not hard stuff, or is it?
No, every day. In fact, I was laying in bed last night thinking about, and I was thinking, who doesn't get this?
Right.
Who doesn't get this? I was thinking back to race and bias conference that I'd been at, combating race and bias, and there was a young woman, college student, goes to a Midwest college. Woman of color, and she was on a panel of students, and she never looked at the audience once. She just looked down at the table and she said, I'm exhausted.
Right.
I'm so tired. She was a junior. She said, I can't do it anymore. Every day, I am trying to bring somebody along, administrators, facilitators, teachers, students. And she said, I don't have the energy left. I need to live my life.
Yes.
I can't meet you where you are and help you decide whether or not I'm equal to you.
Right.
Who doesn't get this about equality and that people are all the same?
Right.
How do you just not get that at this point?
Yeah.
Of course, we can't take that attitude.
Right.
But I feel that every day. How do you not get it?
And how do you deal with this, being Dee, and obviously given you're the executive director of the Diversity Council, you carry a lot of weight in this community. It is what it is, right? Kind of like our police officers that we had last week.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you come in the
Thank
door?
you for doing that show, by the way.
Yeah, that was really, really good.
Yes.
We love you guys.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you come in the door to do a presentation or facilitation or change things, and you know the weight is, oh, here comes Dee, and she's going to get us all diverse, particularly in a very professional community like this.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that, or you just have that still will that, boom?
It's a different approach every time. It depends. Who are you? Where are you? So like with our clients, we go to extreme lengths to understand who they are before we start our approach to making change. What can you tolerate? What can we, how do we move you without alienating you right from the beginning? Right. But I'll tell you, more in leadership circles, people will back this up. I don't worry as much about alienating you. I'm okay being that gadfly and just saying, really people, as many times as it takes. But it's got to be effective, right? We don't want. A lot of people have this bad taste left over from the 80s and the 90s and diversity training and square pegging around hole stuff. But and that's not what we're about. Right. But we got to push where we can and make statements where we can. But always bring that empathy and compassion with. And sometimes it's difficult. And I've had trainers come, and say, "Oh, I can't do it right now. Right. I'm sick and tired of diversity, of meeting people where they are. Right. It's can get really frustrating. Yeah. So then you have to change who's doing what. I've had groups that I've had to take myself off because I couldn't go there. Yeah. Right. I've had to find somebody who's better equipped to take that. Right. And that's the reality. But you can't ever give up. And, and I do feel positive. I do feel there's a change. I do feel every day that more and more people are having that aha moment where they're like, wait a second, I get it.
Right. Well, thank you for coming out, Dee. And
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
We're taking advantage of Dee, and we're not going to pay her any money for this.
No,
maybe Bud will. But since we had her, I wanted to make sure that we took time to talk to some issues that happened not only this week, last week, and the week before in our public schools. So thank you for coming. Thank you for all you do. She is a resource to our community, everybody.
Yes,
so
she
make
is.
sure you tap in.
The Diversity Council is
Yes.
to really good people.
Right.
Really good people. Lots of them.
So we thank you for Dee being here, and she's going to stay along with us.
Yeah, we would want to we want to ask Dee how we want to contact you.
Good idea.
Oh, yeah.
And with issues or whatever that they need to find out how to address and contact the Diversity Council.
Yep. So easy way is through our website, diversitycouncil.org. It's a great way because it gives you that chance to get down facts and details. But you can always call us or email us. It's just info@diversitycouncil.org.
All right.
Great.
People from all over the country find us that way.
Sounds good.
Well, great.
Sounds good.
Well, we are doubly blessed here today. We have a pillar of our community that came on a moment's notice to be with us here today. He has done so much in this community. He is the chair of the Rochester School Board, Don Barlow. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate it. We'll have you have a seat there. We are privileged. We are doubly blessed with these two individuals. And Chair Barlow, I want to be careful as you only represent the Rochester public school system, but we would love your wisdom on other things that we talk to as we get into schools. Certainly we'll focus a lot on the Rochester public schools, but as you are chair and you only govern this area, we would love your expertise otherwise, because you are a wise man. I've sat down with this dude. I said, dude, this is my elder here. I use that barbershop language. Oops. Our chair, Chair Don Barlow, many times he's a wise man for this community. We thank you for what you do. But as we get into it, I want to go through some things that came to our attention in the last 3 weeks. One, and I won't one school, and I won't name this school. We got a messenger of a video of two students speaking to a teacher to a South Minnesota school, and I'll say at least it's on the west side, trying to talk to their teacher about being called the word nigger. And we're just going there this morning. And this wasn't Owatonna. And they sent it out to us, hoping that we can help bridge the gap between them going to this professional. And we have it on video, and I was going to play it today, but I don't think that's the right forum to do that. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with this video that we have. But they're complaining to their teacher about being called the word nigger. And the teacher is quizzing them like crazy. When and where did it happen? And their whole goal was to ask, this is happening all the time. Please help us. And the teacher in this instance, while she was somewhat compassionate, she just wasn't seeing it. And she was really trying to protect her school. And then on 2/11, my kids go to Owatonna public school. And I get a text from my daughter early in the morning. Hey, Dad, I'm in a safe room. Things are going crazy in Owatonna High School. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. And I freaked out. What's going on? I was thinking more of a Columbine type of situation. She mentions it's race, and the next thing you know, all that comes out, mini race riot or whatever you want to call it. Students over, one, if I remember correctly, one student over the weekend was calling some folks nigger, and then another student got into it come Monday. It's a race riot. And I think 2 students were arrested, no, 3 students were arrested. and the one that caused the melee, or 2 or 3 that caused the melee were not arrested, and I'm not sure if there's a law that applies to that. But the sad part of that is, there's a young lady who was in detention, and now she's in that pipeline to prison thing, and maybe she shouldn't have reacted as she did, but she was called that name, and she
was provoked.
She was provoked.
Yes, she was.
But she's getting the harsher part of the criminal justice system. And then, and I want to speak to this carefully, this week we get news about the Rochester Public Schools still struggling with the discipline issues with minority kids. And I wanted to we need to talk about this, because this is happening not only in Rochester in some way, shape, or form. Owatonna, the school that I did not mention, but all of South Minnesota, they're dealing with this, I want to be careful, a migration of diversity in their schools. And some of it is due to, I'm going to go there, And we kind of talk about it here, Rochester becoming so expensive to live in, and folks that who are at-risk minority or can't afford to live here, they're going to these other schools, and diversity is blowing up because it's cheaper to live in these smaller cities. So I wanted to bring some discussion to these issues on what can be done to help with all these issues, because it's there. It seems like a lot of these schools are not equipped to deal with it. I will say Owatonna, the Human Rights Commission, being at one of their meetings this past Wednesday, they're trying their best. I was at that meeting, but they were just way overwhelmed. This is out of our realm of expertise. So as we get into this conversation, and certainly with you, Chair, how do we deal with this issue of race, particularly in a society where it's being energized?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I think it's timely to have the conversation. Certainly, one of the easier things to look at would be, of course, schools and teachers. For me, I started a program some 10 years ago, Start Right, Stay Strong, which identified the important role that students, parents, and community play.
Right.
Because absent the involvement of community, parents, students, then the schools are whatever they are, good, bad, and different. So I like to, while I'm not in denial regarding any of the associated data that's released and how it is referenced, I do encourage individuals to mine beneath the narrative.
Right. Okay.
Because it's easy to respond to a headline,
right, that's
to a phone call. But I would say and offer this even, you know, as a member of the Rochester Public School Board, and we meet twice monthly. Rarely are there any individuals of color present. Now that's not to say, because there aren't any present that that's contributory to the problem. But I do believe it is symptomatic of a greater problem. And that is of not feeling a sense of empowerment,
right,
and or value. So I do happen to believe that when we as parents and community, and we're keeping it 100, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
When we as parents and community become involved and engaged, then systems are more responsive to and accountable to. Now that being said, it is important to note that the majority of the uptick in disparity actions as relates to Rochester Public Schools were really the result of a small amount, handful, probably less than 40 students.
Okay.
That's important to hear, because if
Real
one
talk,
simply looks at the uptick, oh, they're this and they're that, not realizing that, oh, well, there is an uptick, if you will, but it's evolving or centering around a certain amount of students. And they may happen to be students of color. Now, let's even mine down a bit further regarding that. And I didn't commit to memory the data because I do believe it's important to look beyond the data. So what I will offer is this, by simply saying that there are probably 25 students or so that have accounted for 48% of the infractions. Now, if we don't know that and we simply respond to, again, a headline and we see uptick in and treatment of, not realizing, wait a minute. So this is where community and parents and students themselves become more of a lens we need to look at and look through.
Right.
So you spoke of trauma earlier, okay? And there may be some driving issues that are causing these handful of students to act out, behave, to use the term provoked. Well, that is true often, okay? And yet what we must, as parents and community, perhaps on some level communicate is just because certain words are used does not necessarily necessitate that a certain reactive response should occur.
Right. Right.
I think we can empower and equip our kids to be more, well, I don't want to ever take away the power,
Voice, yeah.
Right, right.
okay, or the voice.
Mhm.
But there are different ways to respond to. You know, you mentioned that, well, what happens if our children bring it to the attention, follow the student handbook or guidelines, bring it to the attention of staff and or teachers, and nothing happens? Well, that's where frustration and then levels of, well, I'm going to handle it myself may come into play.
Yeah.
But one must still understand there are outcomes when we choose to take
Of course.
matters into our own hand.
Of course.
So I'll just kind of put that out there initially.
Right.
Now, if there are specific, you know.
No, that's
bad
real talk. I
points-
think that's balanced. How do we, I mean, various things there. How do we empower the students? One of the things when I was talking to my daughter about the Latana situation, when they went to the safe house thing, she described this as all the minority kids were in one place when they had to separate kids, and then all the Euro-American kids were in another place to deal with this. And the funny part was, and my daughter and I had a good opportunity to talk about this, she was with more of the Euro-American kids. And she was like, why is this happening? And as we continued to talk, there was a sense of lack of empowerment for those students. Like, wait a second, this is what happened, this salacious word being used and being drummed up, and yet we feel like we are being disenfranchised. How do we help those students without, because obviously, I guess I would have done the same thing. Oh, I'm about to, rock some heads. Well, yeah, you said that. I mean, that's how I grew up, or whatever. How do we empower them?
Well, again, much of it has to do with how one has grown up.
Right.
And so, for me, growing up in military bases, I come from a different point of view.
Right.
Though both my parents were raised in the segregated South, and my dad speaks of the first house they lived in was a former sharecropper's home.
Wow.
So it's not that I'm removed from, our truth,
Okay.
our reality.
Yeah.
Though I will say, though, our experiences are different.
Okay.
Yet I think we all respond to the salacious use of words.
Right.
Okay. Regardless of. And yet I should say there should be an equal response of offense even when we use it among ourselves, if you will.
Yeah, we got to figure that part out.
Does it become more egregious when someone other than ourselves uses it, or it's only an offense when, it's cool when we use it, not so much when they use it.
Right.
Especially understanding the initial development and usage of the word.
Yeah, at the Owatonna meeting, they said the word is being used pervasively, at least in the Owatonna public school system.
And it was more than just the use of the word in these social media
Right.
preliminary things.
Right.
I mean, it was bigger than just that.
Yeah, true.
Sure, and I can't really speak to the Owatonna.
Right.
You as a parent are much more aware of. I'm relegated to what social media and or what's published in local news outlets.
Yeah. Okay, I got a question. Here in Rochester, how do you feel about the diversity, if there is diversity training for the teachers, to deal with, some of the 25 that comes from different rural areas, the urban areas, I mean, and then they come in not having a lot of discipline at home, and come in to the teachers to deal with these kids accordingly, maybe not overreacting and understanding that kids need to be disciplined, but not over disciplined.
Sure, very good point. And in fact, the OCR report, Office of Civil Rights report that was initiated some 4+ years ago, identified that there was disproportionality occurring within the Rochester public schools. And in part, to some degree, it may have been attributable to the very point you're making. People of different cultures not really understanding, not feeling threatened just because a student of color has raised their voice, and or responded a certain way.
Mhm.
So prior to some of the professional development that the Rochester Public Schools has committed to undertake these last 3-4 years, the disciplinary metrics were pretty much left to an individual teacher's opinion,
Mhm.
interpretation,
A lot of subjectivity.
a lot of subjectivity.
Subjectivity.
Yes. That is changing to where the discipline requirements are better defined.
Okay.
And so on one hand, you see some aspects of the data decreasing in numbers
Okay.
because of that. The empowering, if you will, and the equipping of staff,
Mhm.
as well as students, if you will, and parents to know the ground rules,
Mhm.
okay, to know what one's rights are,
Okay.
maybe to suggest how far to push it when to back off.
Right.
And so, but you are correct. There biases do exist
Mhm.
on the part of, I think, all human beings.
Mhm.
It only becomes counterproductive when we allow that bias to, if you will, disenfranchise and or to result in disparate treatment towards others because of, I may be biased toward pistachio ice cream. I'm not, but as an
That's
example.
some good stuff, Chair.
Oh, is it
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm a sherbet guy.
Okay. But I shouldn't hold that against you, you know, nor vice versa.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's the subconscious effect of bias when we allow that to feed through. And now I view you different or less than or not equal to because of what your preference may be,
Yeah.
style may be. It is important, and I understand and accept fully that each of us are different. I was at one of our local schools on this past Thursday when the Commissioner
Mhm.
of Education was present to look at one of our full service schools, Riverside Elementary, that has a high minority student count, which is very positive.
Right.
And they're doing some great things there, and I would perhaps encourage an invite from staff there to tell the story of how they are engaging community, walking the neighborhood, engaging
Right.
families,
Yeah.
students, empowering students. There were students of color who shared their stories of engaging in public speaking, actually speaking to the commissioner, the school superintendent, and other community partners to share how their lives are being impacted by programs such as that. So you're absolutely right. We, again, from my point of view, need to, as a community, regain our voice, utilizing it in the ways through even real talk, such as this, having the opportunity to inform, engage, let parents know your voice does matter.
Right.
You can make a difference, and that's the only reason I had made reference to. When I look out at a school board meeting and don't see anyone like myself or even close to it, it causes me concern because again, I'm thinking and look back on my mother who grew up in a segregated school, who received the books and school equipment that the white schools were throwing away, and yet she had a love for education, and even up till her passing at the age of 87, still could recall much of the academic rigor and love for education because education meant something.
Yeah.
It was viewed as a way up and out. There was a sustained commitment on the part of community and parents now and students. And so to that end, we must ask that question. Where's that passion? There was also this past week in the local newspaper a great article regarding a software robotics team that several students of color were a part of.
That's right. We
And
reposted
these
that.
are the stories that need to be, it isn't just a negative, okay, disparity and this and that. You know, unfortunately, unlike Minneapolis and or St. Paul, where where their school board members are elected to represent a specific area, like the city council or county commissioners, Rochester Public School directors, as we are called. We represent the community at large. So even though obviously I'm a board member of color, I just can't be advocating, you know, for, and I don't want to call it a single cause. It's a worthy cause, and I would like to believe that my fellow board members share and see the value and worth. I believe to some degree, I don't want to limit, but I believe the superintendent sees that as well. And yet,
that's good. I will tell you, and Rochester's a different community. Folks are calling for his head right now, and I say that respectfully, that he would lose his job. And be careful and say that. Because given, and you weren't, some of this wasn't under your tenure, but kind of getting back to his question, when the initial OCR came out, they reacted to it positively. We get equity specialists, and of course you can't put everything on them. Things that change. But people say, well, what happened? You got equity specialists, and there was a committee I was on at one point, and I'll be honest with you, I quit on the committee because I didn't see it going anywhere. And now we have this issue again. And I'm not calling for anyone's job to be lost, but real talk, folks are saying, wait a second. And again, I understand a lot of the board members weren't there when this.
About this 3 or 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
More than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Initial report was more than 10 years.
Okay, so,
right.
how do, and I'll let you get back to your question or the question, but are we training the staff to do this well, to deal with the diversity? Because obviously it takes on a huge chunk of the school. And are we really training them? Is the equity specialist, whatever it is, doing well? And I say this for this fact, and this is a positive about going on. I talked to the the superintendent's going to be hiring 2 equity specialists for next year. That's what he said I could broadcast that. Does that work? I guess that's where I'm going.
sure.
Dee, I love the look on your face.
Okay, well,
Look at her, look at you.
well, I should mention this first and foremost, that our equity specialists, the current 3 that are persons of color.
They're great.
And if you've not had them on your program, you should.
And that is Willie,
and
Toby, and there's,
and
I'm not sure what
relatively new.
Yeah, I haven't-
I forget her name. Martine. I'm sorry, but
We're coming for y'all. Come on out and show us how you do it.
Yeah.
making a difference. As much as they are able, their frustration, if I could speak on their behalf again, in part, is reflective of my frustration, and that is without the support involvement of community, okay, parents. Now I differentiate. When I say community, I'm making reference to organizations, okay, to include churches, of which I am a pastor of one, parents, okay, of our students, okay, grandparents, those who may not have students in the district, still have a voice, still have a legacy, still can make a difference. But if we are absent from and not involved with, then where's the difference being made?
Right.
And then the accountability of students themselves, knowing that they're not being sent to school to be, at the end of the year, be awarded best dancer, best dresser.
Right.
Okay, I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, what about best learner, best student, best academic scholar? You know, reestablishing the value and benefit of education as a whole.
Dee, what were you thinking?
Oh, go ahead, Dee.
So, I think a couple of things.
Right.
You know, when we work with organizations who embark on this journey by saying we're going to place the responsibility for equity in these people's hands, so then we can turn around and say,
Right.
Point the finger,
There you
We
go.
did it.
We did it.
that happens a lot, particularly when the creation of those positions is mandated for you.
Yeah, you're right.
Then it's harder
keeping it real.
it's
That's
harder
true.
to really integrate, to give those people true benefit. It has to do with the real desire of leadership and of everyone to change a culture. And so when we start with a new, working with someone new in a new organization, that's the first conversation we have is, you know, why
Right.
and who,
Mhm.
and how do people in the daily work know how important it is? How are you showing that commitment,
Yeah.
visualizing that commitment,
Yeah.
making it a real thing that belongs to everybody?
Right.
So, you know, I tend to be not as thrilled by the creation of small groups or
Right.
they're a critical part, but it has to be part of an entire shift in language and shift in culture and shift in approach and commitment.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's where professional development comes in.
Yes,
At least as
absolutely.
it relates to the Rochester
It's
Public
important.
Schools.
Yeah.
I simply responded to the inquiry relative to the equity specialist.
Who are
I
fabulous.
only briefly
Yeah.
referenced professional development that is designed and intended to address culture
Right.
and curriculum. And so those are ongoing processes.
Yeah, it is. And they can only do so much, the equity specialist.
That's true.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Like
They
she
can
said.
only do what they're,
And I was kind of going to say the same
Enabled.
point. You know, people, you know, you got levels of criticism. You know, people sit down and cry. You know, you at home talking about you want to criticize the
Right.
school board and the system and the disciplinary problems, but then you don't come to the school board meetings.
right.
Yep.
You're
You
not
don't get
involved.
involved.
Right.
You don't.
You're not even
you don't support.
informed.
Right.
Exactly. So I just wanted to
That's
ask you.
true.
You said twice a month for the people. When are the school board meetings?
Right.
Okay.
When are the school board meetings so people can encourage the people
Yes,
to come
sir.
out?
Okay. Second and fourth Tuesday of each month.
The second and fourth Tuesday of each month, everybody.
And we'll get that on our website.
There is a public comment period as well at 5:30.
Yes.
So if any member of the community wanted to raise an issue or concern that is not contractual or, you know, things such as that sort, they're
Okay.
able to do that.
Mhm.
And so we encourage that. Rarely does that occur. I can speak firsthand from the point of view of before the last iteration of the OCR report came out. Once it did, I was among those who would testify as a citizen, as a member of the community, as a pastor before the school board. So I know that that opportunity is there. In many ways, that's what led me to run for the school board.
Yep.
My belief that I can make a difference and
All right.
become a proponent of, and I'm trying to do that. I'm into my third year, my first term.
Yes.
So does it start at 5:30?
No, that's the
Public comment starts at 5:30.
Okay, so-
Starts at 6.
Starts at 6.
And what's the
to-
location?
Well,
Edison
actually, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
If there are people present and care to comment, however long that takes, and then we start the board meeting.
After that.
On occasion, there's no one present, so we
Okay.
start the board meeting at perhaps 5:31 or
Okay.
whatever.
Okay,
So the
and then
board
it
meeting
goes
starts,
until. Oh, you guys can be there till
last
midnight.
week we were there till I think 9 after 9.
Yeah.
But,
Okay. We'll get it on our
Location.
website so that.
The Edison building?
yes, Edison.
Okay.
Yep.
So the Edison building, people. 5:30, second and fourth Tuesday of the month.
Right.
All right.
So, question for you all, in the aftermath of what happened in Owatonna, what happened at this other school, and what's going on in Rochester, but certainly I want to go to that incident that happened in Owatonna. And it's interesting how they're trying to deal with it. The Commission, Human Rights Commission, God bless them, they're trying to deal with it. The school system is having some groups. They are trying to call on all the professionals in Minnesota to come down and help in some way, shape, or form. And I'm looking at all this and I'm like, and I've commented a couple of times. What would be your advice to this school system on how to deal with the aftermath of that incident?
So my
Right.
advice would be dialogue beyond
Yes.
with all school stakeholders, which I'm like you, that's the entire community. You have to start having a serious, and you have to make space for people to get all the way through
Right.
what is happening to them, what is their lived experience, with the idea that we need to believe them,
Right.
we need to acknowledge it, we don't have to, you know, condone or what, you know, but let's hear one another. So that you can start to figure out why is it happening. So these kids that are, you know, that first group of kids that were doing these things, reading through and watching those
Mhm.
pieces,
Mhm.
this is not early onset,
No,
right?
and
This
they,
is not early onset racism. This
No.
is deep racism.
and they've had
and-
various issues to keep it real with
Yeah.
Owatonna with these issues. So.
Yeah, so at some point, you gotta call it that, and you
Mhm.
have to start, really talking about it.
Mhm.
The school district needs to be part of that in that they need to hear and respond to students
Mhm.
when it comes to them.
Mhm.
And I'm glad they're adding some equity specialists, because at least that becomes a
Right.
pathway
Mhm.
where students and parents feel they,
Mhm.
are being heard, and that
Mhm.
their message is received, and
Mhm.
so.
And again, I think the community tends to underestimate its own value.
Mhm.
Board members, be it Owatonna or Rochester, are elected,
Mhm.
okay? And they are elected and responsive to, I think,
Mhm.
The needs.
the electorate. Now, in part, had you not yesterday sent out an email indicating
Mhm.
my responsiveness would not have been
Right,
as it
exactly.
is. So I make the point, it's important
Mhm.
that parents realize that.
Mhm.
Absent that, then
Right.
issues come and go,
Mhm.
and parents may show up because there's an ongoing issue, but after it's been addressed,
Then
then
it dies off.
so
Right,
so
all
it,
the time.
the incident itself should not be viewed as in isolation. I should say I believe it's an opportunity.
Right.
It's created the awareness,
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
and now there's an opportunity for community,
Right.
for parents, students, okay,
Mhm.
staff,
Mhm.
and then ultimately the creation of positions
Mhm.
is not an answer.
Mhm.
It can be a tool, but it's not an answer. For some, if one isn't careful,
Mhm.
one views it as an answer. Oh, well, they've taken our concerns seriously, they've created these positions,
Yeah,
we're
Check it out.
good, and,
That's it. All
yeah.
racism is
yeah,
over.
Yeah.
right.
So a couple of super tough questions.
can I give one more?
Yes,
sense? The other thing is to realize that, southern Minnesota is coming late to this game.
But they
And
don't
there are-
believe it.
I know, but there are so many resources and so many
Right.
stories and so many pathways that have been developed
Mhm.
elsewhere, and lessons learned,
Right.
and pitfalls to avoid. That, every opportunity we have to take in some knowledge and some wisdom
That's true.
from somewhere else, we need to take advantage of.
So these are two questions coming out of the Human Rights Commission out of Owatonna, and then having been in this area for a long time. How do you engage? And there's no question, in some of my learning in my master's, you have to have the community model within education. There's no question about it. But how do you engage a lot of the population we're speaking to, the at-risk, voiceless population, and get them out? And then two, how do you get the majority of the community to admit there's a problem? I'll give you an example. When the incident happened on 2/11/19 in Owatonna, the right, whatever, that Wednesday, the Human Rights Committee had a meeting. Everybody's like 75 people showed up to voice their concern, and I applaud the commission for doing that, mostly African American or minority. They had another meeting this last Wednesday, the one I was able to go to, about 25 people around there, all Euro-American, expressing some decent concerns. But it was interesting, the contrast, and now they're trying to go back, okay, now we need to get that 75 to come back out and try to help, blah, blah, blah,
With
blah.
the 25.
Yeah, and I'm like,
that's the thing.
and when they said that, I was like, noble effort, but it ain't happening.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that within my spirit, but how do you engage both of those communities? One is at risk, they feel like I ain't going to that because they ain't listening to me anyway.
Well, there's no trust, right?
Right.
That is
That's what the
generations
problem
of distrust
Yeah.
in process
Right.
and systems
Right, right.
that
That's the
isn't
problem.
gonna go away.
So how do we break that trust?
Right.
Yeah,
Have
exactly.
to
How do
show,
we break that
right.
barrier that's put up through historical trauma, like
Right.
you
Oh,
said,
Right.
absolutely.
and the past issues and the stuff that's still
Connecting
happening.
systems.
Also, I mean, one of the questions, a tough question for you, D, is how diverse is Rochester? Really?
Oh, Lord.
So not integrated, not inclusive, but diverse. Diversity is just a state.
Yes.
So
yes.
it just means there's a lot of difference present.
Did
right?
you just
That's
say
all
not
it is.
inclusive?
Not inclusive.
Boy.
Yeah, that's tough.
Oh,
That's tough.
and
That's
I
tough.
wish
Wants to be working on it, trying,
has it in their monikers.
has it on the sign, but not yet inclusive.
Yeah.
But there is the desire and deep. This is what I say when I talk about this region. There is deep desire and the ability. Right.
The
The
ability is
people
there.
here have
I
the
agree.
capacity to
That's
do
fair.
it.
Right.
Right. This
Yeah.
is a place where
Right.
we can do this really
There's
well.
no question. No
Yeah.
question.
And we can do it way better than even 10 miles outside of Rochester.
I
He's
totally
currently
agree.
doing it. But it isn't. It isn't
Yeah.
inclusive yet because we don't understand. We haven't done enough to understand what does that really mean.
That's
Right.
Yeah. What does it mean to be pluralistic? Right. That's the sharing of power, not just the sharing of space.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Not just sharing air. We're actually sharing power.
Yeah, that's
Good.
Yeah. So that's ultimately what I hope. I mean, that's the goal.
And for me, a great example of that in play, I've had opportunity as board chair to participate in several events within our public schools. And for me as a African American man to go in and see the faces of African American children and children of color respond and lighten up and to be excited by is important. Again, that's why I'm a strong advocate of community involvement, because to see a dad there, not because he's been called by the school, but a dad there because he's concerned about our kids is important.
Yeah.
Because the value, the power, I don't think we understand the power
Right.
It's
that is present.
the biggest power we have.
Right.
Absolutely.
I agree.
And so using this forum as a plea to encourage involvement, minimally perhaps at the classroom level, the classes that your children are part of. Maybe even if you're a retiree and your children are all adults such as mine, still seeing the value and benefit of making a difference, bringing that skill set, that learned experience you've acquired along the way as you have progressed through career and corporate structure and acquired skill sets and knowledge that now can be passed on, because our kids need that. And they need to see that they too can make it.
Is part of this, and I'm going to go there again, we're opening up all kinds of cans of worms. A lot of people say the education system is broken. The public education system is broken. And it's part of that, the reason why we're having these issues with the diversity is, in various, because the system is broken. And I'm not saying
start with
how.
curriculum.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a strong proponent of public education.
Me too.
If we're, looking or the opposite of that are charter schools and or private schools.
Greater disparity of opportunity and access.
Yeah. So I'm a strong. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I'm going to go there again. Do we need? And I know in the community, I grew up in Indianapolis, and we have a model here, a school where, and I'm not saying resegregate, but a school that deals with a lot of our at-risk kids, minority kids, because like with Andre, what he does athletics and help them through trauma and education and so on and so forth. And he often tells me a lot of these kids are not even ready to play basketball or a team sport because you have to go back and deal with that historical trauma. And so we have to get them there. Should there be, and I'm not trying to dumb down education, and I'm more so talking about culture, in my opinion, identity, which is huge with the work that I do or a passion that I have. Do we need a school system, if the main system, like a school that's going to, we're going to enrich you on the basis of your culture. We're going to give you that positive identity. We are going to try to model our education around where you're at and get you where you need to be. Do we need a specific school that can do that, or people are say, "Oh, you're resegregated"?
No, I just hope not, because that's the problem that we have.
Right.
Is a lack of empathy toward difference.
Right.
So my son, one of my sons, is developmentally disabled, and this has been going on in that community. This tension between mainstreaming and keeping them apart. And when developmentally disabled people are mainstreamed, everybody benefits.
That's
from
true.
that.
Yeah.
And so why can't we create over time, these spaces where everyone gets to bring their authentic self
I agree with
and
that.
their culture, and
Right.
they're all honored, and all.
Right.
We can't keep doing that. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't create additional supports and spaces and
Right.
ways
Yeah.
Right.
to do that, to strengthen the understanding of culture, to strengthen the things that students
I
need.
understand. Yeah.
But you know, I look at even the pulling out of kids that are talented and gifted, let's say. So
Right.
IB program schools where, you know, when my son started high school and we're sitting, you know, hundreds and hundreds, probably 1,000 parents in this
Right.
auditorium listening, and they're like, so we have IB and this is what's happening, and we have non-IB.
Oh,
No, you
not
don't.
good. Right.
You got students.
Right. Right.
And all of a sudden now there's this huge divide that we just created in the minds of those students
Yes.
and creating another level of difference. These things are counterproductive.
Right.
What we really want, and you know, I had the great good opportunity to you know, work on, as the response to intervention program rolled out in Colorado public schools, and that means all kids start together. And as something happens in a learning environment, doesn't matter if it's what caused it, is it a developmental delay, is it behavioral, is it mental health issue, whatever it is, then you're going to initiate a response, an intervention.
Right.
Okay, and the goal is to keep all students together with minimal interventions up until the point where,
You need to. Okay.
yeah.
That's good.
So in theory, it's wonderful. It's like communism. It's great on paper, but it's really hard to execute. And it puts a ton of weight on the teacher, the classroom teacher.
Right.
Well, the beauty of Rochester Public Schools is that no two schools necessarily are the same because none of the
That's
students
huge.
in the schools
I
are
agree
the
with
same.
that. I agree.
Okay.
That's massive.
So I think that's important, and many of the schools are doing the very thing that you said. Again, I'll simply reference Riverside as being one of those schools where even within the school you have programs that are designed uniquely for not just around the cultural aspect, but the trauma aspect.
Yes.
I mean, Johnny may not be ready at this point, but so we're going to put him, equip him, empower him to succeed based on where he is with the golden mind, bringing him up to where he needs to be. And
Bringing him in.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Right,
yes.
I mean,
Right.
that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
That full sense of belonging that people.
So that's why, on the other hand, from a cultural linguistic point of view, that's why you have the Somali school here, where they're able to fully invest in culture,
And the Chinese.
language, you know, religion. Public schools are
So you wouldn't
designed-
say that's a good thing for some of our African American at-risk kids. You would be against that type of model for those.
As far as totally pulling out, I would be against. As far as building things around,
Right. Or even, see,
Yes.
because I'm from Chicago, and even acknowledging Black History Month
right?
in the school system. That's big. You know, Chicago, we did we had the big posters up in the school
Right.
when it's February comes. We acknowledged and we took pride in that. You know, to learn a little bit more about our culture, our history, and we had a curriculum around learning more in that month. You know, and we don't get that here. You know, the kids don't have that. Just a small.
Depends on the teacher.
Well, they don't.
Sometimes, but- And I agree with John, you know, the schools are all different, and there are some great benefits to site-based administration and some of that control.
Yeah.
But it's only as good as the
Sure.
person leading it.
Exactly.
That's true.
And that's the other.
Yeah,
the other
and
issue.
so to that end,
Yeah.
the superintendent would say, I'm referencing
Yeah.
Riverside heavily, would say, the right person's there.
Right,
But that rings true throughout.
Yeah.
It should be the case with all of our
Yeah.
schools.
Right.
The right person, not only in terms of
Yeah.
leadership as relates to principal,
right.
but as relates to teachers as
Yes.
well. And the only way to champion that, or to, as a community, not necessarily demand, but to be a part of that process that creates that, is to say, you know, we're fully supportive, we're
Right.
on board, what can we do to make that happen?
Right.
And how much autonomy can we give you to
Right.
make that happen
That's
in
right.
the right way?
Wow.
So
Well-
the ALC, so there are schools where if there's not a true fit within the normal run-of-the-mill, not to
Things
suggest
happen.
run-of-the-mill is bad, but they're not able to really, it just isn't working.
Right.
The Alternative
Too many
Learning
kids,
Center,
yeah.
is available.
And ours has
within-
historically been wonderful.
Right,
Yeah.
right. To even there now based is a drug alcohol.
Yeah.
Free school.
Yeah,
for
that's-
those
that's-
who've been
that's really
struggling.
cool.
I mean, they have a place
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
where
is
they
awesome.
can go, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank y'all for being here. Your presence here alone is amazing.
Amazing.
Two pillars of our community. Obviously, Dee with the Diversity Council, all that she does. Please access her services, and then the chair of the school board, Don Barlow. And remember, school board meetings, at least here in Rochester, are the second and fourth Tuesday of the month, and public forum is at 5:30, and they'll go till midnight, 2 in the morning.
No, we won't.
Make sure you
Don't
get
encourage that.
involved with your school board, and I'm gonna put these two on the spot. Use them as a resource. I know he's the chair of the Rochester Public Schools, but it's the biggest school system. It's the third largest city in the nation, and I'm sure our Owatonna people and other school districts.
State.
Did I say state? What did I
You
say?
said nation.
Okay, the
Which would
coffee
be
ain't
like,
working.
Yeah.
Chicago. Oh yeah, Chicago. Chicago.
I just had to
In
throw
the
this out.
state. And I'm sure they know a lot. Dee's done a lot in Colorado, huge city that she's from there. So tap on these
Florida.
folks for their expertise. A lot of issues, but they don't have to be issues. As Dee said, we can do this. But we got to commit to it. And those of you that have money and power, you got to give up some of it so we can do this. Yeah, I did say that. All right, Barbershop Talk. Nice to talk to y'all. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Saturday.
Thanks for coming.